Okay, folks, so I'm going to do something weird today. It's going to be a very strange message. Instead of me preaching a sermon, I'm going to do more of a presentation. And so it's weird. It's going to be really weird. It's not going to be like what you're used to from me. And I picked today because the timing is really good for a few reasons. And it is pretty consistent with how our God works. But we have a few things happening at the same time. So one, for example, is it's the beginning of a new year, which is traditionally considered to be the perfect time to set some goals, right? Typically, around the new year, you look back to your last year, look forward to your next year, and set some goals. Um, Another reason why this is good timing is because we finished John chapter 17 last week. We're going to start 18 now, of course, as we're getting close to wrapping up the Gospel of John together. And so we're in a transition point in that story, so this is good timing to take just a 1 week break. And then thirdly, my vision team had its last meeting last month. I'll tell you what I mean, but my vision team completed a goal that it set this time last year. So our vision team has been working on something for a year, and we finished our process last month. And so what we're going to do today is I'm going to roll out our vision to you so you can kind of see what the vision team has discerned. So I'm not telling you what my vision is. What the vision team did is we discerned God's vision for this church. And I wanted to make sure I didn't do that alone. I wanted to make sure that I had a team of people who know how to hear from the Lord, all discerning God's will for this church together. Because where you experience unity among Christians, there's the Holy Spirit. It's affirmation of the Holy Spirit working. But the vision team met at least once a month, every month for the last 12 months to figure out just that. Who we are as a church, as ordained by God, and where does God want to take us as a church, and how does God want us to get there? And so the vision team, we composed that team of people who are diverse in many ways, diverse in age, diverse in gender, background, testimony, roles within the church. So it was a bunch of different people. The one thing that we all had in common was they're members of this church. And I had one interview question, which was, how do you know when you're hearing from the Lord? So I wanted to make sure these people knew how to hear from God. And what does it look like when you hear from God? And how do you know whenever you're hearing from God? And so if I could tell that these are people who knew how to hear from God, they qualified to be on the vision team, aside from the fact that they're members of the church. So they would say, this is my church family. I'm invested in the success of this church family. And then we set out to figure out our kingdom concept. I'll tell you what that means. But a year ago, we stepped out to help me discern the will of the Lord and God's strategy to move this church forward as a family, long term and short term. So we discerned who we are as a church and where we're going. And that process was discerning what we called our kingdom concept. Our kingdom concept is basically what makes our church unique. Our kingdom concept is what makes us different from all the other churches around us. You look around this church and there's characteristics that make us different than other churches. It uniquely positions us to do things that other churches can't do. So all churches should share the common mission of making disciples. And most churches would at least say that that's their mission. And so most churches will at least agree on some fundamental doctrines, some basic principles. Whether it's this flavor of denomination or that, we should probably agree on these fundamentals and say we're out to make disciples. I say should there. But there's something different about every church, nevertheless. Even though we share these common core principles, there's going to be something unique about every church. And that makes that church effective in a specific niche kind of way. So the church down the road is going to be better at us than at something, and we're going to be better than them at something. All by God's design. I mean, every Christian is a unique person. If the church is a body of Christ, I mean, it's no wonder then that each church is unique, just as unique as any other individual within the church. Our kingdom concept is what makes us unique compared to 10,000 other churches in our area. To determine our kingdom concept, we had to ask and answer 3 questions. Now, if you can go to the next slide, I'm going to put something up on the screen for you. So what we had to ask and answer three questions. One, who are we as a church family? Who are we as a church family? And so that takes in consideration mostly like people who would be at least regularly attend, but definitely members, people would say, I'm committed to this church and invested in it, and especially leaders. So who are we as a church family? What makes us up as a church family? And then secondly, the second question, where are we in community? This community is unique. This community is different than Montbello or Highlands Ranch or Southlands, right? This is a unique community. So where are we in community? What are the distinguishing factors of where we are? And then the third question, what makes our leadership team excited? What are the kinds of things that's going to get the leaders in this church up out of bed and excited to move forward? And so asking and answering those three questions helped us to determine our kingdom concept. I briefly tell you how we answered those questions. The first question, who are we as a church? Well, we noticed that we are a diverse church family. There's a lot of diversity in this church, ethnically, and cultural backgrounds, and economic position. There are some things that we have in common, and there is a lot of diversity here. And we believe that a healthy church is a diverse church. One of the things that this church celebrates is its diversity. And so we would say that if you look around in a church and everybody looks the same, then there's a health problem in that church. And so we are grateful for our diversity. The second question, where are we in this community? We are in a diverse area of a diverse city. We noticed that there's just a lot of different backgrounds here, a lot of different cultures here, a lot of different economic statuses here. Aurora is very diverse in a lot of different ways. Another thing that we noticed about in question number one, who are we as a church? We noticed that we're unconditionally loving. And the culture here is one that feels like family. So somebody could come walking in that door staggering drunk, or somebody could come in here dressed to the nines, in a suit and tie, who's grown up in church all their life. And we're not going to treat either of them any differently. They're going to be unconditionally loved no matter what. And people often describe the culture here as one as family. So, man, this just feels like a family to me. Well, another thing about the culture of our community, with all the diversity that I just described, one common thing among the various residences in this area, if you do a demographics research online, is that there's a lot of families here. Most of the homes have kids in them. So for all that cultural and economic diversity, one common characteristic is family. However, many of our direct neighbors are in poverty. And one thing that's for sure about the whole city is that it's very lost. A survey shows that Aurora is 96% lost. So most people here do not know Christ and Savior. Now, the third question, what gets your leaders excited? We noticed that our leaders here are excited to see people get saved, to see the saved become disciples. So one nice thing about our leadership team is that they're not just going to go out and witness and see somebody make a profession of faith and then say, okay, job well done. Our leadership team would say, that's where we're just getting started. We want to invest in relationally in the spiritual formation of these people so they become mature disciples. And then furthermore, we can't help ourselves but to get a little bit excited about leadership development. So all Christians are called to make disciples, but our leadership team here seems to be just excited about the opportunity to identify and empower leaders for success. And so our leaders are motivated by the lost getting saved, the saved becoming disciples, and leaders being sent out. As we asked and answered these questions, we defined who we are as a church family, and we started to get an idea of what God wants to do with us. And that is our kingdom concept. We discerned our kingdom concept, God's concept to expand the kingdom of God through this church family. And as we did that, we found a few words and ideas coming up a lot. As we started to describe all this and identify it and discern it, there were some words that were just reoccurring. One word was diversity. Diversity came up a lot. And another word that came up a lot was family. Family came up a lot. So diverse, family, these things are common characteristics in our kingdom concept. Once we had that, we were able to discern God's mission for our church family, which led us to our mission statement. This church now has a mission statement. We didn't before. We have a mission statement now. That wasn't something I wanted to create by myself. This was something I really wanted to have a team of Christians help us to discern what is God's mission for our church. So if you can put on the next slide, our mission statement is empowering a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. We believe that accurately describes this church family. Empowering a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. We believe that describes what motivates us and who we are and where we're going. So our mission is to empower a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. I believe that's an accurate mission statement. It's not aspirational, it's descriptive. See what I mean? That's who we are. So the mission statement now gives us a target. That's our target on the wall. And with a target on the wall, we have a clear direction. So whenever we're taking steps forward as a church family, whenever our organization invests resources, whenever we do anything, it should be taking steps in that direction. If it's to take a step in another direction, then it's not mission critical to us, and we'll have to ask some questions about whether or not that's something we want to get involved in. There's our target on the wall. Now we know what to aim for. Now we know what we're shooting at. Empower a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. There's our target on the wall. And it also is kind of a filter, or at least part of our filter. Our filter is what we call our vision frame. Our vision frame is got 4 sides. Let me put another image for you on the wall, on the screen. This is our vision frame. So if I was to put my vision, put God's vision for this church in a frame, imagine you put a picture in a frame, right? And the frame isn't what you're looking at. It frames and accentuates the vision or the picture. So the vision frame is to accentuate, to kind of create borders around the vision. And this becomes our filter and helping us to figure out, are the resources we're about to exhaust taking us in the right direction? And so the mission is one side of our vision frame. I'll elaborate on this more. But this is our way of creating a visual for our filters. So are we going to do it? Let's ask the vision frame. And if it's not consistent with the filters that we put in place, then it's not for us, And so our vision frame is like a filter for all we do and will do moving forward in a broad sense. It's like a target on the wall. And so if we're shooting resources, we're shooting at this target. If somebody comes along with an idea or an opportunity that's out of line with our vision frame, then we might pass on that opportunity, even if it's a really great opportunity. Somebody says, hey man, I can get a screaming deal on used cars. I can get them all, you can sell them for thousands, and I can get them to you for hundreds. So, well, we're not a used car dealership. That sounds like a great deal. Tell you what, I'm going to put you in touch with somebody who's better able. This vision frame doesn't tell us how much ministry we will do. It just tells us how we would apply values to the ministry that we do, or the type of ministry that we do. Doesn't mean we do less ministry. It just informs us on the type of ministry. So, for example, it's going to give us a scope of our priorities to focus on, so that everything we do moves us forward in the proper direction. We're not taking steps off the path. So, just an example, we're probably not called to start a food bank, right? We don't have the facility for it. We're just not going to be a food bank. It's just not going to happen. Not here. It's not part of God's vision for us as a church family. And so what if somebody called us up? I got a call and says, I want to donate a bunch of shelves and a bunch of food to you. Well, that sounds like a great resource. That's worth hundreds of dollars. That would bring people in. People are hungry. They'll come for food. I can get names on my list. And that sounds like a really great idea. But it's just not what is a part of our kingdom concept. There might be a church down the road who is definitely called to do a food bank. And they're seeing the lost get saved over there as a result of their food bank. Those people are growing into disciples, but it's just not our thing. And so I'll say, okay, great, thanks for the resource. I'm going to give you a phone number of a friend. And we're going to stick to the things that are right in line with our vision. So what might be good might not be good for us. The vision frame helps us to filter, so we're not resource driven. So that's a great opportunity because it's a resource that we don't have. It must be of the Lord, so I'm going to say yes. No, this is going to help us discern what does the Lord want us to do, and say yes to every one of those things, even if that requires us to step out in faith and kind of get a little scared as we do it, and say no to the things that might be kind of low-hanging fruit, maybe too easy, if they're not in line with our vision. So let me elaborate more on this in a few moments. But first, to be able to do that, I want to take you deeper into this vision frame. The first side of the vision frame, if you can go to the next slide, is the mission side. Mission answers the question, what are we doing? What are we doing? We are empowering a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. That's what we are doing. That's specific. It's not general or ambiguous. That's very specific. So generally, we're called to make disciples. But specifically, how are we going to be making disciples? Well, we're going to empower a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. That's how we specifically are going to accomplish God's mission, in particular for us. So that mission answers what are we going to do. Next is values. Values are why are we doing it? So why do we want to empower a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members? Our values are why we're going to do the mission. Next is strategy. Down there at the bottom of the vision frame, our strategy is how are we going to do it? How are we going to connect people to a life of these values, to living out these values? So strategy answers the question how, and then measures, next, is when will we know we've done it? When will we know we've been successful? When have we accomplished the mission? When do we know people are living out these values? When do we know our strategy has been successful? Measure the results. So mission is what, values are why, strategy is how, measures are when. And now we have the vision frame starting to come into focus. I believe every organization, especially church, should be able to discern their own vision frame. They need to be able to answer those 4 questions. What are you doing? Why are you doing it? How you want to do it? When do you know you've done it? Because if you don't have a target on the wall like that, people might guess at what they're supposed to aim for, and they'll probably guess wrong. So we have a very clear target. So that's what a vision frame is. Let me tell you about our vision frame. Go to the next one. Now, I know there's a lot on there. You can't read it all. I'm going to break this down for you in more detail very quickly, but you can kind of see all 4 sides of the vision frame are filled in. We figured out the why, the how, the what, and the when. And so let me start with mission. Our mission is to empower a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus with future family members. And so there's our mission. There's our what are we doing. Next is our why are we doing it. Our values, the values side of the vision frame. Abide, belong, and glow. If you've been around, you've seen this before. We believe that the life of a Christian is all about relationships because the Christian has the life of Christ being lived out through them. And Christ was all about relationships. He placed a very high value on relationships, and especially 3 relationships. And so what was important to Christ will be important to the Christian. Things that he valued, we will value. The most important relationship to Jesus was his relationship with God. He put his relationship with God the Father in front of everything. He carved out time of a busy schedule to make sure that he had his alone time with God. And he everything he did was as an overflow of his relationship with God. We believe that the life of a Christian is not about a bunch of do's, don'ts, rules, rituals, systems, and ceremonies, but it's actually just the life of Christ being lived out through us because God lives in us. And so we say all that with one word, abide. That's our key word. And the second most important relationship to Jesus was his relationship to his disciples, to God's family. He invested a lot of time in empowering people for spiritual growth and to expand the kingdom of God and to make more disciples. He spent a lot of time with his spiritual family. His relationships with his spiritual family were a big deal to him. We believe that the church is not an organization. It is a family that we belong to. The church is not an incidental part of God's plan. It's actually a fundamental part of God's plan and how he will grow us, how he will grow others through us, how he will speak to us, how he will use us, how he will mature us, and how we will worship. How we worship together as a church family is significant. And so we say all that with one key word: belong. Belong describes that value, that second relationship. And then thirdly, the third most important relationship to Jesus was his relationship to the lost in the community around him. It was very important to Jesus that his kingdom be expanded. It was very important to Jesus that more people knew the love of God. And so he invested a lot of time in doing acts of service that would reveal that love, to draw people in and establish credibility so that he could then share the gospel and hopefully they would receive the love of God in a saving way. We often reference the scripture in Matthew that says, let your good deeds shine in the darkness so that your Father God will be glorified by the work that we do. And so we talk about glowing in the dark. And so we say all that, the life in light of God glowing in the darkness by the actions of his people. We say all that with one key word: glow. And these three key words, abide, belong, and glow, represent the three most important relationships to Jesus and therefore to a disciple and therefore to this church: relationship with God, relationship with God's family, and the relationship with people who don't yet know God. Abide, belong, and glow. That's the why we're doing our mission. These things motivate us to accomplish the mission God has set out in front of us. Then how? How are we going to do it? The strategy. How are we planning to connect people to living out these values? We're saying that if you want to grow in your relationship with God, you can do these four things and it will empower your relationship with God. We're saying that how you spend your time matters. If Christianity is all about relationships, and our relationship with God is just that, a relationship, and it's not religious rituals and systems, well, then it stands to reason that the inventor of relationships would have us empower our relationship with him the same way we grow in other relationships in our life, by spending time. How we spend our time matters. I could spend my time in ways that break my relationships, and I could spend my time in ways that build my relationships. I could spend my time in ways that break my relationship with God, and the Bible calls those things sin. He says if you do these things, it separates us. It hurts and damages our relationship. Or I can spend my time in ways that build my relationship with God. And the Bible shows us these four things. We call them the 4 G's. If you want to grow in your relationship with God, you'll do these 4 things. A disclaimer: you can do things like, say, for example, gather time. You can gather with your church. People can do these things and not grow. But if you want to grow, you'll do these 4 things. See how it works that way? So first is God time. If you want to grow closer to God, spend time with him. That's time spent alone with God daily. You and him is being together in the Word, in prayer. Maybe there's some music. Maybe there's a devotional. Maybe there's a walk in the park. Whatever it is, but it's just you and him alone daily, making sure that, that comes first and that it's a priority and that you're not trading that in for anything. In fact, I would say of all the G's, that's the most important one. There will come a point where you'll, as a baby Christian, need spoon-fed a lot. But there will come a point where you become independent and are able to put the spoon in your own mouth. And you will grow more in your God time than in any other time as a result of that, just growing. So then secondly is gather time. That's time spent weekly worshiping with our church family. That's what you're doing right now. Gathering with your church family and worshiping together and getting to know God through how he lives his life out in the Christians around us. And just being, there's things that God can't do for us any other place, any other time. There's things that happen that are significant in these moments. So gather time is a fundamental part of our strategy. Then there's group time. That's time spent in a small community group with my church family regularly. So that could be your potlucks. That could be your small groups. That could be when you get together with your friends from church and just hang out. That could be any of the time that we're spending together socially in community with each other outside of the church gathering. Because it's a shame when the only time Christians see each other is when they pass each other in the hallways in church. We will grow in our relationship with God together as a community. And so that'll happen just socially throughout the week. We create small group opportunities to just give us some really obvious ways to do that. But anything that you do, whether it's those potlucks or just socializing, that would be your group time. And then there's glow time. That's time spent regularly with a group from your church family, serving the community and doing outreach. There's no better way to see God work than to make yourself available for God to work through. If you say, hey, God, here I am, use me. I'm about to go out and I'm going to do this thing. And I'm just going to let you do whatever you want when I get there. Guess what he's going to do? He's going to work through you. You're going to see some miracle action. That's going to be a testimony in progress. You're going to experience stuff the likes of which most people only hear about in our mission spotlights. And so glow time. God time, gather time, group time, glow time. That's our strategy for how we will connect people to living out our values. And then measures. When will we know we have been successful? Now, this is a hard one. This one's a little trickier. This was actually the hardest part for me, and where I was really grateful the most for our vision team, helping us to discern measurements of success. How do you measure spiritual growth? Measurements of spiritual growth, it's an intangible thing. You can't put it in a spreadsheet. You can't write it down on a report, like the numbers and stuff. It's just not quantifiable. Nevertheless, it is observable. You can observe it. You can describe it. You can see it. You're aware of it when it happens in you and the people around you. But how do you measure that? And so I really was grateful for my team, because the conundrum that churches have faced for a while is that we measure things that are not necessarily success results. For example, all churches will count heads. We all count how many people are in our service. We count how many dollars are in our bank account. We have to know these things. And so the old adage, butts and budgets, nickels and noses. If you've been going around a church long enough, you've probably heard somebody throw around one of these cliches talking about, measuring these things. And I think, we are not the first church to recognize that these metrics fail to measure spiritual growth. Because people can attend your gathering without ever growing spiritually. People can make contributions to the collection plate and it not be motivated spiritually. So there's a good reason to measure those things, but it's not to measure results. It's not like, hey, we're successful, so we're growing. You can experience numeric growth without people in your congregation growing themselves. People can grow up in church without ever getting any further in their walk with the Lord. But we still have to measure these things, but we measure them more as resources in, not result coming out. So a lot of churches would say, okay, nickels and noses, it doesn't work. We measure them anyway. And I agree that we need to measure them anyway. But we were not satisfied to stop there. We needed to know, what do you measure and how do you measure it? So we recognize that, nickels and noses, you still measure these things, but you measure them for the same reason you know how much gas is in your car. You need to know how much of a resource you have to move forward. So every time God adds a church family member to this group, there's another person who is a potential care provider and a disciple maker, and maybe somebody who can walk down our leadership pathway. So now our capacity to care has increased. It's good to know how many people are in your church family, how many people are coming weekly. And furthermore, it's good to know how much dollars are in your bank account, because that tells you how much care you can afford to provide, whether it's disciple making or outreach. You just need to know these things. For the same reason you need to know how much gas is in your cars. If you don't, you're going to stutter along the way, right? Okay, so we just talked about input. What about output? How do we measure real spiritual growth? Not resources, but results. And so we've come up with 5 questions. We believe if we ask these 5 questions, and we can kind of get to know if somebody is growing spiritually. And so these 5 questions, they're hard to, you still aren't going to be able to generate a report on. But as we ask and answer these questions, it's going to reveal some stuff in us that will demonstrate if there's been spiritual growth. And with each of these, we're measuring our values: abide, belong, and glow. Is somebody growing in their abide relationship? Are they growing in belong? Are they growing in glow? So as we ask and answer these questions, you might discover, man, you know what? I don't know how to answer that. And that becomes a teaching moment. And there's your first step forward. Or, every time they answer it, it's in this generic kind of way. And so you can kind of see that there's been this stagnant growth there. And or whatever. So I'll just give you some examples. You can kind of see which value I'm measuring as I ask these questions. One, what significant experience have you had with God during your God time? So here you can share a quick testimony about just how your God time has been and what significant thing happened. If it's like, you know what, I haven't been really doing my God time. Sometimes it's just checking off the list. Sometimes, man, you should have been there. It was so powerful. This thing happened. It was a revelation. And that doesn't happen every time. But, if we ask these every once in a while, you might be able to draw upon a significant moment in your God time. And if not, then, it becomes an opportunity to disciple a brother or sister and empower their God time. Number two, how have you demonstrated love for others recently? You can see I'm measuring belong and glow there. How have I demonstrated love for others recently? Well, that answer can go in a lot of different directions. And it reveals something about how we are living out our faith. Who have you shared the gospel or your testimony with recently? Disciples want to make disciples. Disciples want to see the kingdom expand. If sharing the gospel or your testimony just isn't a thing for you, then this question is going to reveal that. And it's going to create a teaching moment for us to empower you to grow in that. How have you seen God change you recently? One of the primary marks of a Christian, one thing we know, this is what makes a Christian, is transformation. And a continuing transformation from one degree to another, all our life. So how has God changed you? Or how is God trying to change you now? Well, that says a lot. Or if you're wrestling with something, that says something too. And it helps us to empower you in that way. Number five, what have you had to give up in order to serve others recently? Jesus said that if you don't lay down your life and pick up your cross, you cannot be his disciple. Those aren't my words. Those are his. He's saying you got to die to yourself. It's going to be a sacrificial thing to be his disciple. If there's no sacrifice, you got to wonder, how bright is that light glowing? And so with these 5 questions, we start to get an idea of if people are growing spiritually and how much, and of ways we can empower each other to continue to grow forward. We're probably going to ask these questions in our small group time because our group teachers will be the most qualified to ask these questions in a loving way that empowers people for growth, not in like a condemning sort of shameful way, right? I mean, there should be conviction. If we're not growing, there will be this feeling of, oh, I better do something about that. But that should motivate us forward, and our group time teachers will be best equipped to motivate their students in the proper direction, to create a teaching moment out of that, or to lovingly accompany them down the pathway of discipleship. So group time is where we'll start to roll out these metrics. And now the vision frame is probably starting to come into focus, even though I'm sending a lot of information at you at once. And with this vision frame in mind, we're able to apply it to our planning. And as we've done that, we've come up with a timeline. So in the center of the vision frame, if you can go to the next one, you can see we filled this in with timelines for our goals. So, long range, we've got a 5-year goal. By 2025, here's where we want to be, based on what we've discerned out of our kingdom concept and our vision frame. We've got a 3-year strategy. In 3 years, we want to see these things done. And if we have these things done, we'll be on our way to our 5-year goal. We've got our 1-year goal, which is, 1 year from now, we want to be here. That'll be a real milestone for us. And then the next 90 days, here's what we're going to do to get there. So in the next 90 days, here's what we're doing to get to our 1 year. And in the next year, here's what we're doing to get to our 3-year, and so on, right? So we've got these milestones. And in each of these milestones, we'll evaluate our goals and whether or not we've accomplished them. If we did not accomplish a goal, then we will roll it over into the next round of time. So if I don't get all 4 of my goals done in the next 90 days, roll it over to the next 90 days. But if we do accomplish a goal, then we can set new goals. And this helps us to stay current as our church changes and as our city changes. And it also helps us to stay focused, goal-oriented as we move forward. Because I tell you what, there's a lot of things that could distract us from our goals. So this way, as our church grows and changes, and as our city grows and changes, we stay current with always that goal-oriented focus that's filtered through our vision frame. It allows for consistency in ministry priorities with the flexibility required of a new, growing church in a rapidly evolving community. So that's what the timelines look like. Now let me show you our timeline goals. So I know that's hard to see, but I'm going to break that down for you one at a time. So broadly, starting from the top, gospel saturation leads to leadership development is our catchphrase. What we're saying, our 5-year strategic vision for this church, by 2025, Grace of the Lord Church will saturate our surrounding area with the gospel so that new generations of leaders will be raised up back into their community, resulting in radical transformation. We believe that God has entrusted us with the spiritual well-being of everyone who lives, works, and shops within 1 mile of our location. We're going to use all the means we've got at our disposal to share the gospel with each person in this area. Through various outreach opportunities, we're going to engage our community to share the gospel and work to assimilate them into our family of believers. As new believers become a part of our church family, they're going to begin a process of spiritual formation that will lead them towards maturity in Christ. Each person will be encouraged and given an opportunity to engage in God time, gather time, group time, and glow time. As each person makes progress, they'll be given tools to evaluate their own spiritual gifts and potential leadership abilities. Those who show promise as leaders will be given an opportunity to go down our leadership development pathway. The pathway will give them the opportunity to develop their skills and begin using them. We serve a sending God, so we long to be a place where people are sent from. As new leaders are formed, our desire is to send them into their communities to share the gospel with increasing fruitfulness. We see no limits on how God might call and send leaders who are being raised from within our church family. We believe the gospel not only has the power to transform, but to radically transform. So we desire to see both people and communities radically transformed by the gospel. We see great potential in releasing leaders to go into various communities to unleash the power of the gospel, resulting in the multiplication of disciples, leaders, and more church families. Our 3-year strategic plan to accomplish the 5-year goal. So we've got four elements to our 3-year plan. By 2023, we're going to have implemented the following strategic initiatives. The first one, Christian character. That's kind of the buzz phrase. Christian character. That means we are going to focus on developing Christian character that's foundational to achieving our vision. The spiritual formation of believers. We're going to invest, we're going to have a lot of ways that people can grow as a Christian, and that's a part of our foundational plan. Number 2, our outreach initiatives. We'll initiate and maintain an outreach strategy focusing on community needs, and that will increase our capacity to share the gospel in our area. Number 3, leadership development. We're going to increase the capacity of our leadership development pathway and our leadership team. And number 4, physical facility. Throughout this and the next 3 years, we'll be continuously developing and enhancing our facility plan. Just basically where are we going to be and what will our facility look like. Some of this stuff, it's, we just got to do it. That's practical stuff, so we put it in there, Our 1-year strategic vision. The buzz phrase is lock and blend. What I mean is that by the end of 2021, we're going to assimilate and retain 10% of the occasional attenders, guests, and outreach contacts. Now, here's what I mean. See, in the last 2 years, we've put together a database with just under 700 contacts in it. Those are all people who have either visited the church or given us their contact information through outreach. So in 2 years, let's say, 700 would have been 350 a year. Let's just say that. If we would have retained 10% of those and assimilated them into our church family, So what would that be? 140 more people in this church family? And so right now we're really struggling to assimilate the people who we're caring for into our church. Our vision team noticed a huge growth area. We are doing a lot of outreach, but we're not seeing the fruit from that in our church family. That's just the people who have given us their contact information. We've had visitors, and we've done outreach to people who have not given us their contact information. About 700 people have in 2 years. It is a real problem that our church family is only this size as a result. So there's something big missing from our assimilation process. We can show them the love of God, but we're not connecting them to deeper spiritual services. At least 10% of those people would connect and grow deeper. 10% is a conservative number. 10% of 700? Yeah, there's people in there who would grow into a disciple. But we didn't participate in that. Somehow we missed them. We missed them. They slipped through our cracks. So our goal is within a year is to start assimilating 10% of the people who come through this door or who we go out to. And so we're going to set regular 90-day goals, our 90-day strategic plan to accomplish that. So between now and March, I'm going to do a couple of things. One, communicate this vision frame. So you're hearing it now. I'm also going to roll this out to my leadership team on a more detailed level. And you're going to hear about it in your small groups and various other venues. We're going to be screaming this vision frame loud and clear because for us to accomplish this goal, y'all got to get involved. This isn't me doing it in front of you. We can't do this. I can't do this alone. This is us. It just doesn't work if it's just me. Just like the vision team. It just doesn't work if it's just me. So, next slide. And the next one. The next one is, we're calling this our assimilation funnel. What this means is, in the next 90 days, I want to review and redevelop our assimilation process. So what is our current process? What processes are used in other churches that work? What should our process look like? What can we do to put all these people we're doing outreach to in one end of the funnel and have Grace of the Lord church family members come out the other end? We don't expect that, let's say 700, we don't expect all 700 of them are going to join the church and become a disciple and go help us make more disciples. But some of them should. Some of them would. Yeah. So what's going to be our assimilation strategy? And then number 3, review and develop our tracking system for contacts. We're just saying contact tracking. So I need a way to be able to follow up with all these folks. So as often as I can, how do I get their contact information? And then who is going to help to follow up with these people? What's our system for that going to look like? And then number 4, here's the big one, assimilation team. We need to recruit an assimilation team. People who are gifted in service and hospitality. People who may be naturally extroverted and skilled at meeting people. We're going to develop expectations for this team. Figure out what tools they can use. And we're going to enlist them and deploy them to be on our assimilation team. This team is going to be one of the biggest deals in us accomplishing each of those milestones. This team is going to be a huge thing for our church. So as of today, the most important thing that we could be spending our time on, according to our vision frame, is developing our assimilation team and our assimilation funnel. As this team accomplishes its goals, Christian character will be developed, turning people into disciples of Christ. As disciples are developed, we'll identify leaders within that group to expand our leadership capacity. So let me put another visual on the screen for you. Here's how we expect it to go. This will be kind of cyclical. It's going to start with our outreach. We're already pretty strong there. From there, we're going to be able to put people through our assimilation funnel and add to our church family members. Remember, empowering a diverse church family to share the love of Jesus through outreach to grow into future family members. That's what comes out the other end of the assimilation funnel. From there, we'll identify people who are qualified and called to go down our leadership pathway, increasing our leadership capacity. And that is going to increase the amount of love we can share in the community through the outreach initiative. So this becomes cyclical. Now here's a warning, church. Now I want you to hear this part, because this is serious. And I mean dire. I know too much, so I've got a fear inside me. Our current leadership capacity is unsustainable. As a church, if nothing changes, there's an expiration date on this fellowship. I want that to sink in for me. If we don't increase our leadership capacity in this church, we won't make it to our 5-year strategic goal. We don't have what it takes to last that long. We've already hit a ceiling, or in some ways, we're almost at our ceiling. There's a practical reality. It's just the fact of the matter. We have an expiration date on this fellowship. See, unless our leadership capacity increases, there are some ways that we can't grow. If we can't grow, we can't multiply. Without a children's ministry, we can't reach families. And most of the residences in this city have families. Without a youth ministry, we can't reach a huge demographic of this city. To do that, it takes leaders. Those are just 2 examples. Without leaders helping with our outreach initiatives, without leaders helping with our assimilation funnel, I'm at my capacity. There's only so many disciples I can make in a week. There's only so many leaders I can develop in a month. We have reached, in many ways, a capacity. And until that capacity increases, and I'm at mine, there's an expiration date on this church. And here's why I say that. So we're infants as a church family. So it's normal to be at this place where we're kind of staggering, stumbling along, not totally on our feet, kind of like toddlers, right? And that's okay for a little while. We're a 2-year-old church, so that's all right. But just like any one, right, as you mature, as you grow, if there's not maturity, there's a problem, right? If my 3-year-old daughter is 10 years old at the same level of maturity, there's an issue, right? Like a human child at a certain stage, lack of development means a disability, which could mean critical care. So we, just like a child, are having our hands held by mission partners. We're very dependent on our mission partners as of today. We could not be where we are today if it wasn't for our mission partners. That's a bottom line fact. And that's normal for a church at our age. But if we have not become sustainable by the time those mission partners roll off, we will not survive. I'm not exaggerating. So there's just there's a certain point where you outgrow those partnerships. Some of those are already starting to roll off. And they'll all have rolled off within the next year or 2. So that's just it. Our leadership capacity must increase if this church is going to survive. And it's going to come from this assimilation funnel. So we're going to add people into our assimilation funnel by doing outreach. And people are going to come out of the other end of that assimilation funnel into our church family. And there's going to be potential leaders in that church family who can walk down our leadership pathway and increase our leadership capacity. What I'm saying, and not exaggerating, is that the survival of our church depends on this assimilation funnel and the assimilation team doing their job so that I can do mine on the leadership pathway. See what I'm saying? This is a big deal. So outreach equals assimilation, equals leaders, equals survival, equals growth, equals multiplication. So this could be big. This could be big if this works. It's going to be big. If any of these goals are not met, we will not make it. If these goals are met, we will thrive as we see kingdom expansion in a way that's unique to 10,000 other churches. So it could be big. But this is a church family effort. I'm at my capacity, and I need your help. I can't do it alone. I'm going to give you time for questions later, so just hold your hand for now. So I've brought all this up to hopefully get you excited and get you involved in the mission. Now we have a clear roadmap of what our next steps are. Now my leadership team is going to be helping to lead us through this. And you're going to be vital to implement it. So if you remember nothing else from today, remember that it's outreach leads to the assimilation funnel that leads to the leadership pathway, and then it cycles back around. And those are the big deals for our vision frame movement. So, okay, Gary, you had some questions.